The eggs were already cold when the doorbell rang. I'd made them just how Lindsay liked, scrambled, soft, a splash of milk, touch of chives. The pancakes sat in a short stack next to the bacon she always asked for when she was little. Every year she used to say, "Dad, don't get old, I need you forever." I'd smiled at that. I used to believe she meant it. She breezed in 20 minutes late, smelling of expensive perfume and running mascara. "Sorry, Dad, traffic was hell," she said, kissing the air beside my cheek. Her phone was still in her hand. She hadn't looked up from it once since walking through the door. I pulled out her chair. "Made your favorite," I said. She glanced at the plate, eyebrows twitching like I'd served her leftovers. "Oh, I actually already grabbed something on the way. Oat milk latte and a chia muffin." She slid her phone next to her knife and fork, tapping the screen mid-sentence. "But this looks nice." I nodded and sat down, slicing into my own eggs as the silence stretched. "So," I began, "any plans today?" Meetings. I've got 2 supplier calls, then one with my social media guy. Total nightmare. No one respects weekends anymore." I smiled faintly. "It's Thursday." She blinked, then laughed. Right, God, my brain." The candles on the counter, 2 numbers, a 7 and a 2, remained unlit. I didn't mention them. She didn't notice. After a while, she picked at the pancakes, more distracted than hungry. Her phone buzzed and she snatched it up. "Can I use your Wi-Fi? Reception's trash here." I nodded again, reciting the password from memory. She tapped it in and resumed typing. No, happy birthday. Not even a card, just noise and motion and obligation. When she stood to leave, she gave me a quick hug, her arms barely touching my shoulders. "We should do this more often," she said, already turning back to her screen. "Sure," I said. I watched her walk out the door, her heels clicking down the steps I'd repaired just last spring after she tripped and joked she had dad insurance. I sat back down, looking at the full plate across from me. No candles, no cake, just the faint smell of bacon and a silence that felt heavier than it used to. She called that afternoon, not to apologize for breakfast, not even to thank me. Just a soft, "Hey, Dad," like the morning hadn't happened. I could hear road noise behind her, the faint thump of pop music through her car speakers. "I have kind of a weird question," she began, and I already knew what kind of favor it would be. Her voice shifted into that pitch she always used when she needed something. "It's about the boutique. We're doing really well. Online orders have doubled since spring, but we're a little tight on capital for expansion." I turned toward the photo of her mother on the mantel. Maria's face looked calm, kind. She'd warned me once, "Don't let love blind you to being used, Harold." Lindsay continued, "There's this location 2 blocks down that's perfect. Bigger space, better lighting. It's a dream, really, but I need a guarantor for the bank to move forward." I stared at the fireplace as she talked, running her words like invoices through my head. This wasn't the first time, the first boutique lease, the second, the time her inventory got stuck in customs and I had to wire $5,000 to get it released. None of it paid back, none of it even acknowledged. "I wouldn't ask if I had other options," she said, a soft plea buried in well-rehearsed optimism. "You've always believed in me." "I have," I said quietly. "It's not like you'd be paying anything," she added. "Just your name. They just want someone with assets in case something goes wrong." I almost laughed. In case something goes wrong. Like it hadn't already, every time. "I'll email you the documents," she chirped, her confidence blooming the moment I didn't say no. "You're the best, Dad." I heard the click of her car door, the shuffle of her heels. She was already walking into some meeting, her mind far from the man on the other end of the line who'd worked 40 years to retire without debt. The line went dead. I set the phone down and walked to my desk. In the top drawer sat every loan I'd co-signed, every time I'd said yes. I opened the folder again, and for the first time, I started thinking about how to say no. After the call, I sat in my recliner a long while, the one Maria picked out just before the cancer took her. The house creaked in familiar ways, settling into the quiet. I reached for the old photo album on the side table. The leather cover was worn smooth where my thumb always rubbed the corner. The first photo was of Lindsay's 3rd birthday. Maria had made the cake herself, even though she'd been up all night with a fever. Lindsay wore a paper crown and frosting on her cheeks, arms wrapped around my neck like she was afraid I'd disappear. Back then, I used to think love like that lasted forever. Maria was gone by the time Lindsay turned 10. Just like that. One minute she was reading bedtime stories, the next she was hooked up to machines I couldn't pronounce. And when she passed, it was just me and a little girl with two big eyes asking why her mom wasn't waking up. I took night shifts after that warehouse inventory, data entry for a dentist who paid in cash, anything to keep Lindsay in dance lessons and school supplies. We ate a lot of grilled cheese and ramen. I pawned my wedding ring once to pay for a field trip she swore would change her life. I got it back eventually, still sits in my drawer. Vacations? We didn't have those. Summers were window units and dollar movies. Her first car came from a repo lot. I fixed it up over weekends with tools I couldn't afford. She cried when I handed her the keys. "I'll never forget this, Dad," she said, hugging me like she meant it. She forgot. That photo album held every moment I gave up something for her so she could have one thing closer to normal. I didn't mind. Parents do that. We bleed quietly, no fanfare. I closed the book and stared out the window. Lights from the street lamp cast long shadows across the porch, across the worn wood where I used to sit with Maria and plan out college savings and retirement. We got her through college. We got her a life. But now, sitting there in the silence of my own house, I started to wonder what I'd gotten back. It was past 10 when the phone buzzed again. I didn't answer, just let it ring, watched her name fade off the screen. The kitchen sink still dripped every 12 seconds, each drop louder than the one before. I stood, stretched my back, and moved toward the hall, figuring I'd shut off the porch light before heading to bed. That's when I heard it. Lindsay's voice, muffled and fast. She must have butt-dialed me or maybe forgot to hang up. Either way, her voice filled the hallway, echoing from the coffee table where I'd left the phone. I was halfway to it when I heard her say it. "He's just a wallet at this point." The words landed like a nail through wood sealant at first, then splintering. I stopped mid-step, could barely breathe. "I mean, come on," she continued, her laugh sharp, brittle. "You say happy birthday, you show up, you smile, and he'll co-sign whatever. He always does. That generation? Guilt's like their love language." Someone else laughed. "A friend, maybe?" I didn't recognize the voice. "No, but seriously," Lindsay went on. "He has no clue. I checked, he's still got that retirement account from Mom's job, plus the house is paid off. All he does is sit around and feel nostalgic. He wants to feel useful." My hand was frozen above the phone. I didn't want to touch it, like it might burn me. The voice on the other end was my daughter's, but the person speaking didn't sound like the girl who used to sing in the back seat or ask for one more story before bed. This voice was colder, sharper, calculating. "I'm not trying to be mean," she said, but the smile in her voice was unmistakable. "It's just, I don't know. At some point you realize your parents are basically human ATMs. They press love and expect money to come out." The call dropped. Silence returned. I stared at the phone for a long time, as if it might explain what I'd just heard, as if it could soften the blow, but it couldn't. She said I was just a wallet. And the worst part? I think she was right. The next morning, I couldn't eat. I made coffee out of habit, poured it into the same chipped mug I'd been using for 15 years, but it went cold on the counter, untouched. Her voice, "He's just a wallet at this point," played on loop in my head like a cruel voicemail I couldn't delete. I opened my drawer, the one I never talked about, the one full of paper reminders that my daughter's life had been stitched together with my hands and sacrifice. Her school tuition first. I pulled the receipts from the University of Oregon, 4 years, nearly 70, when all was said and done. I remembered the long hours, the side jobs, the nights my back ached so bad I'd sleep in the recliner. "You won't regret this, Dad," she'd said when I mailed the last payment, but I had. Next was the wedding, a winery in Willamette Valley. Not cheap. She wanted fairy lights and a live jazz quartet. I offered 10 grand. She cried until I gave her 25. Maria would have known better. I hadn't. I found the loan paperwork for her first car. My signature at the bottom, her credit too thin to stand on its own. The same car I'd helped her tow when she ignored the oil light for 3 weeks. "I'm just not a car person, Dad," she'd shrugged. Then the down payment. 30,000 straight from my retirement. She and her then fiancé swore it was temporary, said they'd refinance once they were on their feet. That was 6 years ago. I was still waiting for the check and returner, even a thank you. Even the groceries. I still had the shared delivery receipts on my email. Bags of kombucha, gluten-free bread, and imported cheeses. Things I couldn't pronounce but paid for monthly when she said money was tight. And I believed her. Every time. I closed the drawer slowly, not because I was finished, but because I couldn't look at another thing. My heart thudded like a hammer inside a shell. What do you do when the person you love most sees you as nothing more than a bank with gray hair? I stared out the kitchen window. The bird feeder was empty. Squirrels had raided it again. And for the first time, I didn't feel like refilling it. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I didn't even flinch when her name popped up on my phone 2 days later with a smiling selfie and the caption, "Thinking of you, old man Spurt." I just watched the notification fade like smoke on a cold window. She thought I hadn't heard. She thought I was too slow, too soft, too old to notice. Instead, I walked. Room to room, in a house that suddenly felt like a stranger. In the living room, the recliner where Maria used to curl up with her crossword. She'd hum when she got stuck, tapping the pencil on her chin. Her throw blanket still draped over the arm, folded with care I hadn't had the heart to disturb. She used to call Lindsay her little star, said she was made of brightness and fire. She would have cried if she'd heard those words on the phone. In the hallway, Lindsay's growth chart still marked the doorframage 6 to 17. I ran my fingers over the faded pencil lines, remembered how she used to beam when she stood straighter just to gain a quarter inch. I'd always pretended not to notice. I'd call it real anyway. The guest room still had her old trophies, boxed up but not thrown out. Debate team, cheerleading, some third-place ribbon for a science fair she barely remembered. I remembered every damn thing. And then there was Maria's room, our room. Her robe still hung on the hook. Her perfume-faint lavender lingered in the folds like time hadn't dared erase it. I opened the drawer where we used to keep important papers. Her handwriting still danced across the file tabs. Mortgage, college fund, Lindsay's emergency. We had planned for everything, Maria and I. We just hadn't planned on being used. I sat down on the edge of the bed. My hands curled slowly into fists. Not from rage at least, not the kind that shouts or slams doors. This was quieter, heavier, the kind that builds pressure under still water. She thought I was just a wallet. Maybe I had been, but not anymore. I looked at the photo of Maria on the nightstand, her smile still warm, her eyes still knowing. And I whispered, "I think it's time." The filing cabinet groaned as I pulled it open. It hadn't been touched in months, maybe a year. Dust clung to the handle, and I wiped it away with the sleeve of my sweater. Maria used to keep it perfectly ordered. She believed in paper trails. "Trust fades," she'd say, "but signatures don't lie." I thumbed through the folders, pulling them one by one. My name always came first, Harold Whitman, and then hers. The folders with Lindsay's name were thicker than I remembered. The first one was a joint bank account, opened the summer she started college. "Just in case she needs help," Maria had said. At first, it was small withdrawals, textbooks, groceries, dorm supplies. Then came concert tickets, weekend trips, things I never questioned. The account had never been closed. I flipped to the last statement. 342 drawn last month. Boutique supplies. Then came the loan documents. 3 different promissory notes. One for her grad school classes she never finished. Another for that yoga certification phase. A third for the first lease on her boutique. I'd co-signed every one, even the last after Maria was gone, telling myself it was what a father did. I found credit card statements. She was still an authorized user on my account. Had been for a decade. I highlighted the most recent charges, hair appointments, Uber Eats, something called crystalline soul healing, all billed to a man she thought was too old to track electronic records. My pension summary sat at the bottom of the drawer. A post-it note in Maria's handwriting still clung to it. For peace of mind. I looked at the numbers. They weren't bad. But they weren't what they used to be not after the years of bailing Lindsay out. I stacked the papers on the table. Dozens of pages, hundreds of transactions, years of silent withdrawal, emotional and financial, and none of it balanced. It hit me then. There were no deposits from her, no repayments, not even a note of thanks. It wasn't just a one-way street. It was a siphon, and I'd let it happen because I loved her, because Maria had believed in giving until it hurt. But Maria was gone, and now the pain had nowhere else to go. I didn't plan to go to the diner. My truck just sort of turned in that direction, like it remembered something I didn't. Sloan's Cafe hadn't changed in 40 years. The same cracked vinyl booths, the same faded Coca-Cola sign above the kitchen window. They still served coffee so strong it could strip paint. Maria used to joke it was the only brew that ever made her heart race. I slid into our old booth near the window, third from the back, the one with the wobbly table leg I'd once shimmed with a sugar packet. It was still uneven. I left it that way. "Harold?" came the familiar voice of Dana, the waitress with a memory like a steel trap. "Haven't seen you in a while." "Thought I'd visit the past," I said. She poured me a cup before I even asked. "Still take it black?" "Always." I sipped and looked out the window. Across the street was the bank where we opened our first savings account, the travel agency where we'd once browsed brochures for cruises we never took. The shoe store Maria loved had become a vape shop. We used to sit in this booth and make plans, retirement, road trips, maybe a cabin somewhere in Montana. Maria had wanted a porch swing and a view of the sky. We never got there. The money went elsewhere, to Lindsay's braces. Her tuition, her boutique. Maria had called it our future in installments. A young couple sat 2 booths over. They were laughing over milkshakes, legs tangled under the table, dreaming of tomorrows that hadn't hurt yet. I used to be them. The check came, $5 and change. I left at 10 and walked out slower than I walked in. Back in the truck, I sat with the engine idling, looked down at my calloused hands on the steering wheel. These hands had held Maria as she died, had pushed Lindsay's bike when she was afraid to fall, had built a life worth more than money. And now they were clenched in my lap, white-knuckled with anger I didn't know what to do with. I stared at the empty passenger seat, wishing Maria was there. She'd know what to do next. But I was alone now, and it was time I started acting like it. I asked her to come by Sunday afternoon. No reason given, just thought we could talk. She responded with a thumbs-up emoji and a "Sure, Dad." No punctuation. She arrived late, as usual, a chai in one hand and sunglasses still perched on her head despite the clouds. "What's up?" she asked, settling into the recliner like it was her own living room. She kicked off her boots and checked her phone before I even spoke. I'd practiced what I wanted to say all morning, rehearsed it over coffee, walking circles in the kitchen. But now that she was here, it came out quieter than I expected. "Lindsay, how do you see us?" I asked, keeping my tone light, almost casual. "Our relationship, I mean." She blinked. "What do you mean, how?" "Just, what do you think I am to you, I guess." She frowned, not angry, just confused by the question. "You're my dad. You've always been there. That's your job, right?" There it was. No malice, no hesitation, just fact. Like describing the weather. I nodded slowly. "Right." She reached for a throw pillow and curled it into her lap. "Is this about the loan thing? Because I swear I'm getting my cash flow together. The expansion's going to turn everything around." "It's not about the money," I lied. "It's just, lately I've been thinking about what it means to be needed." She smiled, the kind of smile people give when they think you're overthinking. "Dad, don't get all existential on me. You're needed. You've always been the rock, you know? I mean, without you?" She didn't finish the sentence. Just picked up her phone when it buzzed, tapped out a quick reply, and tucked it under her leg like nothing had happened. "Anyway," she said, standing, "I've got to run. Back-to-back meetings today. But this was nice. Don't get all sentimental, okay?" She kissed the air next to my cheek again and was out the door before I could say anything else. I watched her drive away, tires crunching the gravel like bones. The seat cushion still held her shape. The air still smelled faintly of coconut shampoo. I sat down and stayed sitting for a long, long time. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind whip through the trees outside. The furnace kicked on at 3:14 a.m., a soft rumble under the floorboards. Maria used to say it sounded like the house sighing in its sleep. I reached for her side of the bed, cold. I got up and padded into the office, barefoot on old hardwood. I turned on the desk lamp just low enough not to flood the room and stared at the stacks of paper from earlier that week. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan agreements. My entire relationship with my daughter, itemized. I ran my fingers along the edges of the folders. Lindsay had never said thank you for any of it. But that wasn't the point, was it? We didn't give so we could be thanked. We gave because we loved. Still, love wasn't supposed to feel like debt. I opened a legal pad and wrote the words "to do" at the top. I drew a line underneath. And then I started writing. Remove Lindsay from joint account. Close backup credit card. Contact attorney about trust restructure. Review boutique lease. Was I still a guarantor? Double check house title my name only. Each line steadied me. Each checkmark a reclamation. I wasn't angry, not in the way I used to define it. I didn't want to throw things or yell. This wasn't fire. It was stone, quiet, immovable. I wouldn't tell her. Not yet. There was no need for drama, no need to teach a lesson. She'd made her position clear. I was a resource, not a relationship. So I would respond the way accountants do. Silently. Thoroughly. Irrevocably. By dawn, the list was complete. My coffee brewed as the sun crept over the backyard fence, painting the frost-covered grass in soft gold. I stood at the kitchen sink and watched the steam curl from my mug. The pain was still there, yes. But beneath it, a strange calm had settled. This was the beginning. Of boundaries, of silence, of choosing myself. She'd never seen me as more than a wallet. But she was about to learn what happens when the wallet closes for good. I hadn't opened the old Dell laptop in over a year. The battery was nearly dead, the charger frayed from years of sitting in the same drawer, untouched. But when it booted, whirring and stuttering like an old dog standing too fast, it welcomed me back with a spreadsheet titled Whitman Family Budget Master. It felt like stepping into an old life. Cells carefully color-coded, tabs for savings, tuition, medical bills. Notes in the margins where Maria had typed little reminders, "Don't forget Lindsay's recital ticket," or "Call water company bill seems high." My hand hovered over the touchpad, the ghost of Maria's orderliness still guiding it. I opened a blank sheet and labeled it, Lindsay, Financial Links. Then I started listing, joint checking account, opened 2007. Authorized credit card, current. Boutique lease, guarantor since 2019. Auto insurance, bundled under my policy. Cell phone line, third line, on my plan. Utilities at her condo, paid from joint. Line by line, the picture sharpened. Every dollar she touched had a dotted line straight back to me, not just money responsibility, exposure. If she defaulted, I paid. If she disappeared, I dealt with the fallout. I opened another tab and wrote, Risk versus Sentiment. In one column, the liability. In the other, the memory that made me say yes, her tears, her promises, her laugh when she called me Dad the bank. I stared at that screen for hours. Not because I didn't know what I had to do, but because admitting it made it real. This wasn't about revenge. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just done bleeding for someone who didn't notice the wound. The list was long, but I would handle it the only way I knew how. one line at a time. The credit card was the easiest to start with. Small steps, low drama. I logged in to the account, same one I'd had since 1996. Lindsay had been added when she was 19. Her card had her name on it, but the bills came to me. Always had. I scrolled through her recent charges: boutique decor, a luxury shampoo subscription, and something called Moonlight Sound Bath for $180. I hovered over the option, Remove Authorized User. A simple button. One click, that's all. I didn't hesitate. Click. The system asked for confirmation. I gave it. Then it asked why. Other. No longer necessary. It felt cold, but not cruel. She'd figure it out eventually. At the salon maybe, or trying to order food. The card would decline. She'd think it was fraud or a glitch. Maybe she'd even call the company. Maybe she'd call me. I didn't mind. Let her. Let her wonder when the wallet stopped working. I closed the browser, exhaled through my nose, and stood up. My hands weren't shaking, not anymore. This was just the first cut, a paper-thin separation, but it was enough to feel it. It was enough to know the bleeding had finally stopped. I waited until Monday morning to call the bank. Figured they'd be fresh, alert, polite. I didn't want attitude, and I didn't want sympathy. Just quiet cooperation. Whitman Federal, this is Trisha Howe. Can I help you today? I gave her my account number and verified my identity, mother's maiden name, last deposit, the whole routine. She chirped along like she was reading from a laminated script. I'd like to close the joint account ending in 6042, I said, the one shared with my daughter. A pause. Just a moment, enough to know she was checking the name on the other side. Oh, certainly. I just need to confirm, are both parties aware of the closure? They will be, I said flat. Another pause, then the clicks of keys. I can initiate that now. The balance will be issued via cashier's check to the primary holder. Shall I use the address on file? Yes. Anything else today, Mr. Whitman? I stared out the window. The bird feeder was full again. Squirrels were back. Always hungry, always taking. Yes, I said. There's a recurring transfer, $175 every Friday, to an account at Statewide Bank, also under her name. She pulled it up quickly. It appears to be a grocery reimbursement. Cancel it. Effective immediately? Yesterday. She chuckled gently. I didn't. I spent the next hour combing through other accounts. The automatic payment for her car insurance gone. The shared utility billing profile unlinked. I even removed her from my Netflix login, which somehow hurt more than I expected. Each click was a stitch closing an old wound. Quiet, clean. No phone call, no explanation. She'd know eventually. Maybe when her Wi-Fi shut off. Maybe when her windshield cracked and the insurance card didn't work. Maybe she'd think the system failed. Maybe she'd realize it hadn't. It just stopped recognizing her name. Todd Reynolds hadn't changed a bit. Same checkered tie, same dry smile, same old law office that smelled like printer toner and carpet cleaner. He'd helped me draft my will 5 years ago when Maria passed. Back then, everything went to Lindsay. It seemed obvious, natural, family. I sat across from him now, will folder in hand, heart heavier than I'd admit out loud. I'd like to make some changes, I said. He nodded, already pulling out a clean form. What are we adjusting? Lindsay is no longer the sole beneficiary. He glanced up but said nothing. I want the house placed into a trust. She doesn't inherit it automatically. If she wants it, she can buy it at market value. Half the proceeds go to charity, half to a scholarship fund in Maria's name. He scribbled notes, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Retirement accounts? He asked. She gets a portion capped. The rest splits between 2 educational nonprofits. I've listed them here. I slid over a printed list. He read it carefully. And if she contests any of this, then she gets nothing. That made him pause. I met his eyes. Include a no contest clause. I want her to understand. Entitlement isn't a blood right. He nodded slowly. Understood. It took an hour. When I signed the final page, The weight in my chest didn't disappear, but it shifted, like a beam finally locked into place after years of bowing under strain. "This isn't punitive," I said aloud, more to myself than to Todd. "It's protective, for her, for what's left of me." Todd nodded again, a different kind of understanding in his expression now. Most people wait too long to draw the line. I stood to leave, folder under one arm. Lindsay would never see this moment, never know when the ground beneath her feet quietly changed shape. But someday, when the will was read and the paperwork spoke louder than love, she'd understand. This wasn't punishment. It was the price of forgetting who I was before I became her wallet. The beach cabin sat quiet under a thick blanket of coastal fog when I pulled up the gravel drive. Lindsay hadn't been there in over a year, but she always talked about it like it was already hers. "When I take over the place," she'd say, "I'm going to hang string lights and do a whole boho vibe, maybe rent it out on weekends for yoga retreats." Maria and I had built it as a dream, not a rental. Driftwood trim, second-hand furniture, bookshelves stuffed with old paperbacks and sea glass in jars, a place for breathing, a place for being. I stood at the door a moment before unlocking it. The salt air hit me the way it always did, clean, sharp, honest, the kind of smell you can't fake. Inside, nothing had changed. A thin film of dust lay across the windowsills. A spider had claimed the corner of the reading nook. The throw blanket Maria used to wrap around her shoulders still draped across the faded armchair. I walked from room to room with a box in my arms. Things to donate, things to toss, things to keep, not many. In the kitchen, I found a note Maria had once taped inside the pantry. "Don't forget the cocoa for rainy days." The ink had faded, but her handwriting hit me like a hand on my back. I sat at the breakfast table and looked out the window, where the ocean licked the sand in slow, lazy breaths. She'd always wanted the cabin to go to Lindsay, but Lindsay hadn't earned it. Not anymore. Later that evening, I called a realtor in Cannon Beach. Left a message. No urgency in my voice, no sadness either. Just the facts. I wiped down the counters one last time, swept the sand from the floor, locked the door. The cabin was never going to be hers. And now, it wouldn't have the chance to be forgotten. The call came at 4:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. I'd just sat down with a cup of tea when Lindsay's name lit up my screen. Not the cheerful emoji-filled text I'd come to expect. A call, real time. That meant one thing. Something had gone wrong. I answered. "Dad?" Her voice was clipped, already halfway to furious. "Did something happen with the credit card? It got declined at Whole Foods." I looked like an idiot. I took a slow sip. "I removed you as an authorized user." A pause, just long enough for disbelief to catch up. "You what?" I said. "I took your name off the account. It was overdue." "Are you serious right now?" Her voice sharpened. "You didn't even tell me? What am I supposed to use?" "Your own card, I imagine." "Dad, come on. I've been Swamp Me boutiques just getting through a rough patch. You've always said you'd help." "And I always did," I said gently. "But help turned into habit. Habits turn into expectations. You didn't ask. You assumed." "Oh my God," she snapped. "You're seriously punishing me? For what? Growing up? Depending on my dad? Isn't that what family does?" "It's time you stood on your own, Lindsay." Silence again, this one longer. "I can't believe this," she muttered. "After everything I've done, everything you've done with my money," I finished for her. "Yes, I remember. You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being deliberate." She hung up before I could say more. I stared at the phone for a moment, then turned it face down. The room was quiet. The tea had gone cold, but I felt warmer than I had in years. It started with a voicemail from her landlord. "Hi, Mr. Whitman. This is Greg down at the Maplewood Retail Building. I don't mean to trouble you, but we haven't been able to reach Lindsay regarding this month's rent. I know you were involved in the lease, and I just thought, well, maybe you could help clear it up. Thanks." I didn't return the call. 2 days later, an email popped up from a vendor, Cascadia Prints. They'd done her boutique signage a few years ago. "Hi, Harold. Sorry to bother you, Lindsay mentioned. You'd handle the outstanding invoice from February. We've sent a few reminders but haven't heard back. Please advise. Amy. No greeting, no pretense, just the assumption I'd keep the lights on like I always had. That's when I logged into the old boutique email account I still had access to from the original incorporation. Lindsay never changed the password, probably forgot I even had it. The inbox was littered with overdue notices, marketing subscriptions, supply orders, 2 bounced checks, a politely worded warning from the bank about low account activity, and one desperate-sounding plea to a brand rep. We're good for it, I promise. My dad will handle the balance. I closed the tab. The truth was simple. Without my money, the scaffolding collapsed. The boutique, her image, her independence, it was all borrowed structure, propped up by belief, trust, and an aging father who couldn't say no. Well, now I had. And the silence that followed was louder than any apology. I imagined her sitting behind the checkout counter, watching the door, waiting for customers who wouldn't come, her phone on silent, afraid to face the invoices stacked in the drawer she never opened. She had her business, her freedom, her lesson. I only hope she learned something from the wreckage. She wore white with gold embroidery, modern but elegant. Maria would have loved it. She cried when I walked her down the aisle, hand trembling around mine, eyes filled with something I wanted to believe was gratitude. "You're the best father in the world," she whispered during our dance. Her head rested against my chest like when she was small and afraid of thunder. The DJ played some Sinatra tune Maria adored, and for a moment the weight of grief lifted. I'd already paid more than I could afford, $25,000 for one day. I'd said 10, she cried. Said it was her dream, that she only had one wedding. I said yes. I always did. Maria had pulled me aside that night, after the guests left. While Lindsay and her new husband posed for last-minute photos under twinkle lights, I strung myself. "You spoil her too much," she said gently, as she folded up a napkin and tucked it in her purse. "She's starting to expect magic without ever learning how it's made." "She'll grow out of it," I said. "She's just young. She'll get it someday." Maria looked at me the way she always did when I was lying to myself. Her voice was low. "Just don't let her mistake love for entitlement, Harry. That line disappears faster than you think." I'd laughed it off. Kissed her cheek. Told her not to worry. But Maria always saw it coming first. Now, years later, the photos from that night still lined my hallway. Her in that dress. Me in my rented tux, smiling, believing I was giving her a better life. I walked past them slowly, pausing at the largest frame. "You said I was the best father in the world." I wondered what I'd be now that the money was gone. She didn't call this time. She came in person. I saw her through the front window before the knock even came, storming up the walkway, jaw set, hair pulled back too tight, sunglasses perched like armor. The kind of walk you have when you're not here to ask, but to demand. 3 sharp knocks. I didn't rush to answer. When I opened the door, she didn't wait for an invitation, just pushed past me, her boots thudding on the hardwood. "What the hell, Dad?" I closed the door gently behind her. "Nice to see you too, Lindsay." "No, don't do that," she snapped, turning. "Don't act calm. What is this? You cut off my credit card. My phone's off. My boutique landlord says I'm being evicted. You changed the Netflix password." I raised an eyebrow at that last one. She threw her hands up. "What's going on?" I walked past her into the living room and sat down slowly. My knees didn't like the sudden movement anymore. She remained standing. "You told me what I am to you," I said, looking at the coffee table, at the worn photo album still sitting there. "I'm just responding accordingly." She blinked. "What?" "Your words. You said I'm just a wallet, and I believed you." She went pale for a second. Her mouth opened, then closed. "You heard that?" "I did." "It wasn't serious, Dad. I was venting. People say things." "Yes, they do. And now I'm saying something back." She dropped onto the couch like her legs gave out. "You're ruining everything." "No," I said. "I'm just stepping out of the way. You've been living in a house of cards I built. It's time you build your own." She looked at me, her eyes filled with something shock, maybe even fear but not understanding. Not yet. You said I was just a wallet, I repeated. So I closed the wallet. She didn't say goodbye when she left, just slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. But the house stood firm. It always had. The beach cabin key made a soft click as it turned its last. I stood in the doorway, a small toolkit at my feet, watching the morning light filter through the salt-speckled windows. I had the locksmith meet me at 9. He was young, polite, didn't ask questions when I told him to change both the front and back locks. "Lost a key?" he asked. "No," I said, "just making sure the right people have them." He nodded, finished the job quickly. When he left, I stayed behind. I walked through the cabin one more time. Everything was in order. The place looked better than it had in years, clean, cleared, quiet. Maria would have loved it this way, peaceful, still. Back in town, I sat in my truck for a moment outside the boutique's commercial building. The for lease sign had already been posted in the front window. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I'd signed the lease years ago. I was still listed as guarantor. Not anymore. My attorney had filed the termination paperwork 2 days earlier. Lindsay hadn't paid rent in 3 months. The landlord had every right. I just made sure the message got to her inbox. Subject line: lease termination, effective immediately. Attached: the letter, the documentation, the photo of the lock change. No message body, no signature, just silence. I sat in the driver's seat a long while after sending it, my hand resting on the steering wheel, the sun rising higher over the rooftops. I didn't feel triumphant, not vindicated. This wasn't a victory. This was a boundary. For the first time in years, I wasn't rescuing anyone. I wasn't cleaning up. I wasn't throwing money at a burning building and calling it love. I was walking away. Not from her, but from the version of me that thought love had to hurt to mean something. I drove home, the wind sharp through the open window, the cabin keys now on a new ring mine alone. The phone rang more that week than it had in the last 3 months combined. First came Carol from Maria's side of the family. She always called under the pretense of checking in, but this time it was different. "Harry, sweetheart, I don't mean to meddle, but Lindsay called me in tears. She said you're cutting her off?" I took a deep breath. "That's right." Silence, then a sharp inhale. "But she's your daughter." "Yes," I said, "and I'm her father, not her bank." Later, it was Martin, an old friend from church. "Harry, I heard Lindsay's boutique is in trouble. You know, she told everyone you were helping get her through it." "I was," I said. "Now I'm not." People didn't like that answer. Word got around. Family brunches I hadn't attended in years suddenly came with invitations, thinly veiled interventions. "Just talk to her. She's trying. She's young." "She's 35, I'd remind them. Young doesn't last forever. Some stopped calling. Others pushed harder, like my change in behavior was a moral failing. They didn't know the years, the dollars, the invisible weight of being needed but never seen. Eventually, I stopped answering. I wasn't bitter, just done explaining myself to people who only saw the headline, "Dad cuts off daughter," without reading the story beneath it. And for those who truly wanted to know, who asked without judgment, I told the truth. That I'd paid for school, a wedding, a business, a lifestyle. That she'd called me a wallet. That I'd finally believed her. Some understood. A few even said they admired it. But most looked uncomfortable, like I'd broken an unspoken rule. Parents are supposed to give without end. Maybe they were right, but I'd made my peace. Because I knew something they didn't. Endings aren't failures. Sometimes they're just overdue. I didn't write it to hurt her. I wrote it because I couldn't say it out loud without my voice catching. 3 pages, handwritten, no flourishes, no accusations. Just truth. "Lindsay, I love you. I always have. I always will. But love is not the same thing as endless giving, and you have confused the two for too long." I wrote about the college tuition, the wedding, the boutique. I wrote about Maria and how we dreamed of leaving something behind that meant more than money. I wrote about hearing her say I was just a wallet. I told her how that felt. Not to guilt, but to clarify. You didn't say it to my face, but you didn't need to. That sentence spoke louder than anything you've ever thanked me for. This isn't revenge. It's not punishment. It's release. I told her she was capable, that I believed in her more than she believed in herself, that boundaries were not betrayals. I hope you find your footing. I hope you build something without me holding it up. I'll cheer you on from a distance, but I won't fund the foundation. I signed it. Dad. I placed it in an envelope, sealed it, and set it aside. No fanfare, no demand for a reply. Just an explanation, left like a light on in the window, in case she ever wanted to come home for the right reasons. Not because the money ran out, but because she remembered the man behind it. It was Rachel who showed me the post. "Have you seen what your daughter wrote on Facebook?" she asked over the phone, the hesitation in her voice almost tender. "No," I said, "and I don't need to. She named you, Harry." Later that night I logged in. I hadn't touched my account in months. Notifications had piled up like snow. Buried under them was Lindsay's post. It began with a photo of her boutique, dark, the for lease sign glowing faintly behind the glass. The caption started simple. "When the people who are supposed to lift you up are the ones who let you drown." Then came the avalanche. My father, the man who told me to follow my dream, the reason my dream died. He cut me off. Cold. No warning. No conversation. Just silence. After everything I gave up to build this business, she called me cruel, accused me of controlling her with money, said I wanted to teach her a lesson instead of being there like a real parent should. The comments rolled in fast. Some offered sympathy. Others told her to grow up. A few asked questions she didn't answer. I didn't reply. I didn't react. I didn't even breathe for a long time. It wasn't the anger that stung, it was the performance. She'd turned me into a villain, a symbol of betrayal, and strangers, many of them well-meaning, believed it. But I didn't need to defend myself. The truth doesn't need applause. It just needs time. A week passed. Then, too, her boutique's Instagram page went quiet. No new product drops, no sponsored giveaways. The last post, once polished and branded, now sat awkwardly. "We're just getting started." The silence was louder than the noise had ever been. I heard from Martin again. He'd done some printing work for her, said she missed a payment, then ghosted him. She was always nice, he said, not accusing, just sad. But she always assumed someone else would cover the tab. Then came the email from her former supplier, forwarded by mistake to the boutique's old joint account. "We'll be terminating our wholesale agreement effective immediately. Unpaid balances, poor communication, reputational risk." I didn't reply. This wasn't my fire to put out. For the first time, Lindsay was facing the real world without a cushion. No fallback, no emergency money, no invisible hand catching her just before she hit the ground. The weight of adulthood had landed, and there was no one left to carry it for her. Part of me wanted to reach out, to soften the edges, to remind her that she wasn't alone. But I didn't. Because sometimes the only way to grow is to finally feel the consequences of standing on your own feet. And realizing how long they've been carried, the beach cabin had never felt more like home. I arrived just before sunset, the wind cool but not bitter. The ocean moved in steady rhythm, like breath-deep and patient. I lit the fireplace the way Maria had taught me, kindling first, then logs, never too much at once. The flames rose slowly, no rush, just warmth returning to the room, inch by inch. I made a cup of chamomile and sat in her old chair, the one with the fraying armrest and floral cushion that no longer matched anything but still belonged. A book rested on my lap. I turned pages without urgency, letting the words wash over me like the tide. Outside, gulls wheeled above the shore, crying out into the sky as though it still listened. I closed my eyes. I thought of Maria, of Sunday mornings with scrambled eggs and the crossword, of her laughter bouncing off these walls, of the way she'd hum when she folded towels, of her last breath quiet, steady, like she didn't want to make a fuss. She would have loved this moment. I could almost hear her voice. "You did what you had to, Harry. She'll find her way or she won't. But now you can breathe." For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about unpaid invoices or emergency transfers or late-night "Dad, can you" texts. I wasn't calculating loss. I was just sitting, just being. The peace wasn't loud. It didn't come with music or grand realizations. It was something smaller, better, like closing a door and realizing the draft you'd lived with is finally gone. The tea went cold. The fire dimmed. I stayed in my chair until the stars blinked into the sky and the ocean turned black. I was alone, but not lonely. There's a difference. And I finally understood it. It was nearly noon when I heard the knock. Soft, hesitant. I wasn't expecting anyone. The cabin sat well off the road. No neighbors within walking distance. I opened the door slowly, half expecting the wind to have played a trick on me. It was Lindsay. No sunglasses, no makeup, no fury. Just her, standing small in an oversized sweatshirt, arms crossed tight against the cold. Her eyes were red, not freshly crying, but recently enough. "Hey," she said. I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside. She walked in like someone entering a church, quiet, careful. She didn't look at the fireplace. She didn't sit. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, voice thin. I messed up. I waited. I thought I could handle it, that if I posted about it, people would back me up. They didn't. Still, I said nothing. She looked at me, her voice cracking. "I wasn't just wrong, Dad. I was awful. To you." I nodded. "Yes." Tears welled, but she didn't look away. "I don't deserve this. You. Any of it." I studied her face. For the first time in years, I saw her not the version performing adulthood, but the girl who used to crawl into bed during storms and say, "Just until the thunder stops." "Why are you here?" I asked gently. She took a breath. "Because I'm tired. Because I miss Mom. Because I don't want anything from you except maybe a little time, just to talk." Her hands trembled. I gestured toward the chair across from me. She sat slowly, like it might disappear beneath her. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was something else. A pause. A space being cleared. I poured her a cup of tea. And for the first time in a long, long time, we began. We didn't speak much that first afternoon. Lindsay sat by the fire, eyes down, hands wrapped around a chipped mug. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for anything. I waited. The next morning, she was still there, curled up on the couch, wrapped in Maria's old quilt. I made eggs and toast. She ate in silence. Around noon, she broke it. I got a notice for collections from the sign company and the lease settlement. I nodded. "I don't have it, Dad. I have nothing." I looked at her, not unkindly. "I know." Her voice got small. "I thought you might. Maybe you could." "No." She blinked. "Okay." And then something remarkable happened. She didn't get angry. She didn't storm out. She just sat with it. I leaned forward, rested my elbows on the table. "You made a mess," I said. "And I'm not going to clean it up. I know. But I'll help you sort through if you want help that isn't money." She looked up. "What do I do?" she asked. And so I told her. We made a list. Cancel subscriptions. Close unnecessary accounts. List items for sale: handbags, furniture, electronics. Call vendors and negotiate payment plans. Apply for part-time work, any work. Start small. She wrote it all down. "I've never done this before," she admitted. "Not really. I know." She exhaled. "You should have cut me off sooner." "I tried," I said, "but I confused love with protection." She met my eyes. So did I. That night, I watched her copy her list again, clean, in new handwriting. She didn't ask for a cent. She asked for guidance. And for the first time in her life, she listened. A week later, Lindsay stood in the cabin's bathroom, adjusting her collar in the mirror. She wore a simple blouse and slacks I hadn't seen since her college internship. Her hair was pulled back, clean and undecorated. Her eyes were nervous but focused. "It's just a retail position," she said. "Entry, level, inventory, and stockroom." "Sounds honest," I said. "It is." She hesitated at the door. "Do I tell them about the boutique?" "Tell the truth," I said. "People respect that more than spin." She nodded and left, her steps more grounded than I remembered. She was gone 3 hours. When she returned, she didn't say anything right away, just walked in, kicked off her shoes, and made herself a cup of tea. I watched as she sat across from me, steam rising between us. "They offered me the job," she said. "Minimum wage, no benefits." "And?" "I took it." I smiled. Later, I saw her on the porch, phone in hand. She was deleting old photos from her boutique's Instagram, glamour shots, posed captions, all of it. And then she posted a new one. "First day of something real. I've got a lot to learn, but I'm finally ready to start." No filters, no hashtags. Just her, in front of the cabin, the wind in her hair. She was beginning again, not from a place of privilege, but from purpose. And for once, she didn't need me to carry her. She just needed to walk. We met at the diner, not the one near her old boutique. The old one, Sloan's Cafe, Maria's favorite, still had the cracked vinyl booths and overcooked coffee. Lindsay arrived 5 minutes early. That was new. She wore no makeup, hair in a braid, a button-down shirt with a name tag from the store she now worked at. She looked like herself, just not the version she'd spent years pretending to be. I stood as she approached. She smiled, soft and unsure. We hugged not long, not dramatic, but real. Over grilled cheese and soup, we talked. About simple things first: work, sore feet, bad customers, the shift manager who still treated her like she was 16. Then, slowly, we drifted deeper. She didn't defend the boutique. She didn't blame me for pulling back. She just listened, and spoke honestly, maybe for the first time in years. "I thought you'd never stop saving me," she said, stirring her tea. "That's what scared me the most when you finally did." "It scared me too," I admitted. "But I had to do it. For both of us." She nodded. "I know that now." I looked at her, truly looked. There was something in her face that reminded me of Maria. Not her features, but the steadiness, the humility, the work it took to get there. "I'm proud of you," I said. She looked down, cheeks coloring. "I'm still figuring things out." "Good. That's the adult version of growing up." We split the check. She insisted. As we walked out into the parking lot, the breeze catching her hair, I felt something loosen in my chest. We weren't father and dependent anymore. We were something better. 2 adults, 2 survivors, 2 people finally meeting in the middle. And the space between us had never felt so full. That evening, back at the cabin, I logged into my bank account one last time. I opened a new transfer window. Amount 10. Recipient: Lindsay Whitman. Memo: graduation bonus. I smiled. It wasn't a bailout, not a rescue, just a gift, a nod, a handshake between generations saying, "Well done, you made it to the other side." She texted me an hour later. "Lindsay, got your bonus. That's the only kind I ever want from you now. 22nd. I replied, "Harry, you've earned it." Then came the message I wasn't expecting. "Lindsay, thank you, Dad. I'll earn the rest." I put the phone down and walked out to the porch. The moon was up, the ocean quiet, the cabin warm behind me. Maria would have liked how it all ended. Not perfect, but honest. Not loud, but lasting. I sat in her chair, blanket over my legs, and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, there was nothing left to fix. Only things left to feel. And that finally was enough. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.